Okay, I wanted to make this because when I'm scrolling through YouTube and following different people and watching their videos, whatever the information is that I'm learning, I always wanted to know a little bit about their backstory. I find that fascinating, like where people have come from, where they're at now, and definitely where they want to get to in the future. So my background, I was growing up just in a town just outside Manchester called Denton. I spent half my childhood in Denton. I went to Audenshaw School, which is a really good, basically a sports school very close by. And then I moved to Duckingfield, which is very close by. Also, and in with my grandmother or my nan when I was really young, when I was 13. But my childhood was just sport. Whenever I kind of describe it, and whenever I'm asked about it, it was just, my father's philosophy was, you do your sport, and then if you've got time, you can do your homework afterwards. And that was the same for me, and it was the same for my two sisters. And my two sisters, one younger, one older, did really well in cricket and basketball. And I guess for my dad, the idea was that, especially at a young age, you learn so much more in sport, in team games, in teamwork, and what you put in, you get out, and discipline and persistence and resilience, and learning to fail, really super important to learn to do that. Learn to do that before it becomes, the stakes are higher a little bit later on in life. And I guess that's why I'm so passionate about getting kids into sport and keeping kids in sport, and in those troubled years where it becomes easy to leave, other things become more interested. I'm really interested in that, because my childhood was very easy to go off the rails where I lived in Manchester. It was very easy to get in with the wrong crowd. But all summer I was playing cricket, all winter I was playing football and cross country, and all summer I was doing track and field. So it was like running, cricket, football, and then any other sport you can possibly think of, from badminton to table tennis to chess to hockey to rugby. Whatever we would do at my school at Audenshaw, I would be involved in. It was just as simple as that. So that was pretty much my childhood. And then, for whatever reason, you get to an age where certain things become more important, or you think they're more important, and all of a sudden making money became more important for me. So I very quickly started working, which gave up my Saturdays and Sundays to make money. And then I had no clue what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, or what career I wanted to pursue. For a long time I wanted to be a professional sports person. Then I thought, okay, next best after that is a sports teacher, a PE teacher in the UK. And then I had no other careers advice. I had no other kind of idea of what other people did in society, apart from doctors, lawyers, dentists, etc., etc. So my plan was to go traveling. So I went into a local temporary recruitment company. I was just going in there every single day, 7 o'clock in the morning, with my bicycle, waiting for temporary work. And then they'd say, okay, we've got a job for you 20 miles away in Oldham, or the north of Oldham, and you're going to be packing boxes all day. And I was blowing up footballs one day, and I was packing fish, and I was doing these cakes things, and there was all sorts of temporary work. But over the next 3 months, and I was just trying to make as much money as I possibly could so I could go traveling. And the place to go at the time was always Thailand, to go to South America, Southeast Asia to Thailand, 17, 18. It's you're still figuring out yourself, and it just felt like a good idea. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I kept showing up, and I kept getting these jobs, and I was starting to accrue an amount of money, and I was almost there. And then the temporary recruitment company offered me a job internally to cover somebody's maternity leave. So all I need to do is answer the phone and patch calls through to different people. It wasn't difficult work, but it wasn't factory work. I wasn't stood up all day. I was actually in an office wearing a suit, answering the phones, patching calls through. And then they started to teach me recruitment, and I found it fascinating. and they started to teach me sales and how to kind of pick up the phone and cold call businesses or kind of warm call businesses that were already doing business with you, and you could kind of find somebody a job, which is what they've been doing with me for the last kind of 4 or 5 months. And then it almost got to the point where I was about to go traveling, and then they offered me this permanent role to basically be like a graduate recruitment consultant, where I do my education with them and they teach me how to recruit and the different elements of it. And so I had this kind of crossroads whether to go traveling and I decided to take the recruitment career. And then 2 years passed. I was headhunted to work for a bigger recruitment company in the city centre of Manchester, and then I was kind of in that bubble, which is you're kind of chasing the dream, right? So you're looking up at people and kind of looking up at people who you think are successful in society, and usually you kind of correlate that with money. And so people with money usually have, dress a certain way, go to certain places, drive a certain type of car, live in certain places, and that's what I aspired to do, which is, I think, pretty much the typical story for most city people around the world. It's not like that everywhere, as I learned when I moved away to Norway. It's a completely different mentality over there. If you kind of have to show, it means that you don't have. It's the opposite. It means that you don't have money because you feel the need to show it, which totally makes sense if you think about it. But I got stuck in this kind of chasing money, and I thought for a long time I'm just hyper money motivated. I'm doing well, I'm doing a career, it makes total sense because it's like sport. The smarter you work and the harder you work, the more you get paid. So if somebody sat next to you and they're just doing the 9 to 5 and not really thinking about what they're doing and they're underperforming, you're going to earn way more than them. And that resonated with me a lot, and I thought, if there is a career for me out there that's not sport, this could be it. So I did. I did well, and I progressed very quickly. And then for some reason, I just wanted to go further afield. I asked to be transferred to the New York office, which I thought would be an amazing kind of life opportunity and probably open my eyes a little bit. And then the Amsterdam office was performing really well, so I wanted to be transferred there, and I wouldn't get those transfers. And so I was also at a point where you're kind of earning a percentage, of what you're making for the business. And you feel at this point in recruitment that all your clients and candidates are all bought into you and the way that you do business and the way that you treat them. So why are you giving away 70% to your company? And I got tricked by that mentality, because it's not actually true. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in a big business. The branding, the marketing, the kind of the admin, the legalities, etc. So much stuff that goes on behind the scenes that I just took for granted. And I thought, if I go and set up on my own, if I do 50% as bad, I'm still earning 50% of the money instead of kind of giving 70% of it away. So I set up my own company. I tried to recruit people. It became very, very difficult. Although I'd moved to Norway and I was living in Norway, and it was fun. It was a new place. I'd made friends. I was playing football. I brought a couple of people over that had previously worked for me, tried to get them to work for me, but they just didn't want to work and live in Norway. It wasn't for everybody. It was cold. It was expensive. And at the time, everybody was either going to Sydney to recruit. So UK recruiters were going to Sydney, or they were coming to Dubai, which is where I am right now. But they were going for the sun. The problems with Dubai at the time, or the kind of the idea, or the kind of the drawbacks were that it was very strict at the time. I don't think that's necessarily so. I just think that bad episodes kind of make the news. So you'd hear the horror stories of people holding hands, walking down the beach, and they'd be arrested. Which I'm not sure if they were true or not, but that's the kind of image that people got from here. And then the alternative was Sydney, where you're 24 hours away on a flight from home. So a lot of people were getting homesick and then coming home quite quickly back to Manchester, London, Birmingham, etc. So I knew that people wanted sun, and I knew from trips that my favorite place and most fun place I can possibly imagine in the world is Barcelona. And so I set up an office in Barcelona, moved to Barcelona, going great, and then all of a sudden there was a market crash. And for me, a lot of my contractors at the time kind of stagnated, so they were no longer taking people on. And then after not too long, 2-3 months, they started to let people go. So there was a point there where I felt as if I was earning twice as much for a quarter of the money, and I made the decision to take a sabbatical. I took some time, took a cycling trip to Southeast Asia, based myself in Thailand, and we just ride the bike every day. And I absolutely loved it. It was just, I guess it's like meditation. Spending long amounts of time on your own is incredibly important. And you know, if you're into self-development, if you're kind of hit a plateau and you don't know what decision to make or which path to take, etc., I highly recommend it, because what essentially happens when you're spending long days on the bike or long days walking or running or whatever you're doing, you start to ask yourself questions, and you usually ask yourself the same questions, and then the answers become different, and you eventually get to the answers you're looking for, which sounds kind of maybe a bit too spiritual for some people, but for me it was definitely true. And the questions that I was asking was, am I doing what I really love in life? And am I really happy? And then what could I be doing where I would be more happy? And what is my kind of true calling, if you like? Not to get too kind of deep, but what I figured out was it wasn't money that really motivated me. Everybody has to be money motivated to a certain point, but it wasn't chasing money that was my kind of biggest driver. I was definitely driven by competition, which is what made me good in recruitment. But what I missed was, it was really important for me to reach my potential in something that I cared deeply about, and I still cared very, very deeply about sport, and specifically running. So I was still young enough to try to have a go at that again. So I promised myself, I was on this trip from like a final kind of long trip from Bangkok to Singapore. It was going to be over 20 days and nice and easy, 100 kilometers a day. And then a friend of mine in Singapore said, if you can get here by New Year's Eve, we're having a New Year's Eve party, and you can stay here. And so I was pedaling like crazy, 200, 220, 250 kilometers a day, and just loving it. And again, the same questions. And by the time I got to Singapore, I'd already decided that I was going to be a runner, and that I was going to start running as soon as I got back to Thailand, where my base was. So January 3rd was my first run. I thought I'd just go out for an hour, and that was a disaster. Like I paced it wrong, went out too quick. After 400 meters, I stopped, and I had muscle soreness. I don't know if I'd done something, tweaked a muscle or whatever, but all the cycling fitness just hadn't transferred to running fitness. So it was kind of a bit delusional, but that set a light that really hasn't kind of diminished since. So I was adamant that that's what I was going to do, and that my progression or my learning curve was going to be really steep. But I'd done enough when I was a kid to know that I could win races, I could do really well. I just needed to get back to that level. So that it was going to be a journey for me. But yeah, and that's essentially what happened. So I get to the next bit in the next video, but that was up until the point of restarting running.